So we're making fresh pasta, and we're going to make a dough which is relatively dry, and this is what we would recommend. There are lots of different recipes for pasta, and they're often too wet, particularly if you want to make a shaped or a filled pasta and you want to create that al dente quality. These proportions are excellent. So we've got a small quantity here. We've got 115 grams of flour, and we're going to use 58 grams of egg. So you can make it by hand. It is one of the driest doughs that you can make, so it's quite hard. So I would recommend making it in a food processor. So the flour can go straight in. We tend to use a strong flour, which is a bread flour, a high protein flour. A purist would say to you that you use a 00 flour, which is the continental version. The only difference is that it's slightly finer ground, so it's potentially a little bit smoother. Because we're using whole egg, we tend to use a little bit of turmeric as well, just for some colour. It really creates a little bit of interest in the final look of the pasta. We're going to add a good quantity of salt. And when you make fresh pasta with that amount of salt, you don't need to salt the water. Okay, so the salt is in here already. We've got some olive oil going in as well. And then we're going to measure off the egg. So 58 grams of egg. Just beat it up. So it needn't be egg. You could use the egg yolk and then some beetroot puree or some tomato puree or some squid ink, but the amount of liquid needs to be topped up to 58. So let's see what we've got here. So when you make the dough, it appears quite dry. The reality is once you've rested the dough, it becomes almost twice as soft. So that's why we start off with it nice and dry. It's important as well during this process just to develop the gluten. So you've got a nice strong dough. If you think about how thin you roll pasta, it needs to be strong in order to create that nice thin. When you make it in the food processor, you'll notice that you get a very fine crumb. Just scrape down the sides. It can get a little bit stuck on the sides sometimes. So when I say small crumb, this is what I mean. So it's a very fine crumb. If you pinch it together, you'll find it sticks really nicely, okay? So you can see the amount of pressure I'm putting this under. It's one of the driest doughs that you can make. It really is. But with the consistency of this will come a lovely al dente quality and the ability to put a stuffing in here which could be a little bit wet. The dryness of the pasta will stop it from making it soggy. So on the basis that it is dry, you'll find that you may have a few little cracks once you brought it together. That's absolutely fine. Okay. So the thing to do here is to wrap this up and relax it or rest it for at least half an hour. Okay, so that's a plain pasta dough. So the fresh pasta has rested in the fridge and it's considerably softer. The thing that often goes wrong with this is that the dough, as we said before, is a little bit too wet and it gets stuck to the machine. You don't really need any flour on here. You can just use perhaps just a little bit. Pinch the corners. And we're just going to roll it out so it's thin enough to go through the machine. Just a little touch is all you need. So having rested the pasta, it's really important that it goes through the machine without tearing. Otherwise you'll have to rest it again. So once you think it's thin enough, you can put it through the widest setting of your pasta machine. Now you can roll this out by hand if you don't have a machine. So the top tip at this stage is just to fold it in on itself. And in just a second, we're going to go cut edge or open edge back into the machine, but you just need to make sure it's thin enough again. And what this does, not only does it make the pasta nice and smooth, but it also just neatens the shape. So open edge back through. And you can see it's pretty uniform at this stage. If you're a perfectionist, you can just trim the edges off. So reduce the width of the roller and start to work through. So we're looking for a fairly thin result at the end. With a ribbon pasta like a tagliatelle or a spaghetti or a pappardelle, I tend to keep it fairly thick because it's really nice to have that al dente bite to the pasta. With a ravioli or a tortellini, I tend to go a little bit thinner because you bring two pieces of pasta together and therefore you need to start off with something thinner. Just cut this in half. So we can make some pappardelle actually with this. And we'll continue with this piece for the tortellini. So fresh pasta dries out really quickly, so you have to work fairly quickly here. What we can do first of all is just create some squares, and we can do a couple of different shapes. It's a real benefit having the pasta quite dry. It makes the shaping a lot easier. So semolina down on a tray, just to put the pasta on when it's ready. And if you have one of these boards, you can do a lovely ribbed penne pasta called garganelli. And it's just a case of just pushing down, creating a little bit of pressure. And you get that lovely shape. If you don't have a board, of course, you can just pinch them together. Just use the end of a wooden spoon just to wrap it around.